You're listening to Dead Strange, the podcast where I'll be delving into bizarre cases from across the globe. I am your host, Sophie Ray. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about something a little bit different. This is because the case isn't exactly a crime, but it's nevertheless extremely interesting. I hope you'll enjoy hearing about the fascinating case of Mostly Harmless. The Appalachian Trail is the longest hiking footpath in the world, and is famous for its difficulty to navigate and challenging elevation. Ranging from Maine to Georgia, the trail is an impressive 2,193 miles long, and stretches over 14 different states. It's no surprise then that the AT attracts well over 3 million thru hikers every year. Thru hiking is a hobby defined by hiking a trail end to end, and the Appalachian Trail remains one of the most popular locations in America, and many view conquering it as a huge item crossed off their bucket list. In spite of this, the trail doesn't come without its dangers, and they're not the kind you'd expect with the AT's large population of bears and snakes. In fact, animal attacks are extremely rare, albeit you may find the odd tick attached to your leg as you traverse the rugged trail. However, the Appalachian Trail is nicknamed America's most deadly hike for one main reason: its murders. Since the year of 1974, the AT has been the location of 11 violent murders or otherwise gruesome deaths. It's true that you're much more likely to be the victim of extreme weather conditions, or maybe a slip or a fall, than to die by the hand of a murderer as you enjoy your hike. But the occurrence of crime is not uncommon. And that remains a pretty scary fact when you'd normally associate hiking with amazing family bonding opportunities and a deep connection to nature. One deranged killer who haunted the AT was Randall Lee Smith, a Virginian whose strange hatred towards those on the trail spurred him to harm a total of 4 people. In 1981, Smith killed 27-year-olds Robert Mountford Jr. and Laura Susan Ramsey in a terrifying, unprovoked attack. He fatally shot Robert before turning his attention to Laura, whom he brutally beat and stabbed to death. He was sentenced to 30 years for his crimes, but was released on parole just 15 years later, a decision that sent shockwaves of anger across the victims' families and in the hiking community. Unsurprisingly, their worst fears were confirmed when Smith went on to strike again, this time shooting 2 hikers who were fishing in 2008. Randall Lee Smith then stole their vehicle to make a break for it, but he crashed and died days later from his injuries. It seems that karma came around quick for the deranged killer, and his death brought solace to the minds of many hikers across the US. You'd think that travelling with a hiking partner would be much safer, as 2 pairs of vigilant eyes are much better than 1. However, this still doesn't deter the trail's most violent minds, as maybe one of its most violent slayings came in the form of a double murder. In 1996, lovers Julie Williams and Lolly Winans were camping out in the Shenandoah National Park in Virginia with their golden retriever. At some point, they had their throats cut by a killer, who frighteningly still remains at large. Similarly, in 1988, another gay couple became the victims of violence. Rebecca White and Claudia Brenner parked their car at the somewhat ironically named Dead Woman Hollow and started their hike through Pennsylvania. After a while, they set up camp in the Michoud State Forest and began to make love in their tent. It was at this point an enraged 22-year-old Stephen Carr witnessed the 2 women together and fired a hail of bullets at them in a homophobic attack. Brenner was hit 5 times in the face but managed to escape, hiking a staggering 3 miles before she got a ride from a concerned passerby. They went to the Shippenberg police station and reported the horrifying crime immediately. As police travelled to the crime scene, they discovered that White had tragically succumbed to her injuries, with one of the bullets shattering her liver. Hoping to make happy memories with her girlfriend, Claudia was instead left with a horrific reminder every time she returned to the iconic trail she once loved. It was over 10 years ago when this murderous trail claimed its final victim. On Friday, August the 12th, 2011, a group of hikers came across a dead body lying in a shallow grave near the trail in George Washington Jefferson National Park in Amherst County, Virginia. Horrified by the discovery, the hikers contacted emergency services and the man was soon identified as 30-year-old Scott Lilly from South Bend, Indiana. The FBI took charge of this case and they soon concluded that Scott had died about 12 days prior to being buried in his shallow final resting place, and they confirmed he had died from asphyxia by suffocation. His death was officially ruled as a homicide. Whoever had so callously killed Scott had taken his shoes, backpack, a Nintendo game, as well as his trusty AT handbook, making robbery the suspected motive. Scott was pretty well known along the trail and was said to be a seasoned hiker, as well as being an avid fan of United States history. This love of history, particularly of Civil War, was thought to be the one thing that actually brought him to the state of Virginia, as he intended to visit the many iconic battlefields that surrounded the trail. Intending to use his hike as a journey of self-discovery and reflect on his country's history, he was instead cruelly murdered. Alarmingly, Scott's murder remains unsolved, but investigators are hesitant to link it to the several other unsolved murders on the Appalachian Trail, saying that the prospect of a serial killer is highly unlikely. Another unsolved cold case was the murder of Louise Chaput. Chaput, a psychologist from Sherbrooke, Quebec, was no stranger to hiking the Appalachian Trail. It wasn't unusual for her to venture out on weekly hikes along her favourite area of the AT, lying close to Mount Washington in New Hampshire. She knew this area like the back of her hand, so when she took a trip out into the Whites on that cold Thursday morning of 15th of November 2001, she knew she wouldn't run into any trouble. However, some days later, her concerned friends thought otherwise, as she hadn't made contact with them for days. On November 22nd, 3 days after her concerned friends filed a missing persons report, her corpse was discovered just off the Glen Boulder Trail. Her death was a particularly violent one, as multiple stab wounds could be seen on her blood-covered body. A mystery murderer had stolen her car keys and fled the scene. Nobody has uncovered their identity since. Though the trail's many gruesome unsolved murders continue to boggle the minds of many sleuths, both amateur and professional, there is one case that has intrigued them in particular, and it isn't anything to do with all the heinous crime that seems to plague the AT. In fact, what I'm going to talk about on tonight's episode isn't really a crime at all. Nevertheless, the case has brought together a whole community of armchair detectives who all share one common determination, and that's to find the identity of a man known only by 3 peculiar names: Mostly Harmless, Denham, and Ben Billamy. It was July 23rd, 2018, when 2 hikers, Nicolaus Horton and Logan Buell, stopped for a rest at the Communal Nobles campsite in Big Cypress National Preserve in Okeechobee, Collier County, South Florida. They were some 5 miles north of mile marker 63. Time was around 8 p.m. and daylight was beginning to fade, so the two men took this opportunity to have a much-needed rest and a bite to eat. They sat down at a picnic table and relaxed. After a while, their attention turned to a bright yellow 2-man tent pitched nearby, and the two hikers noticed there was no noise or movement coming from inside. They called out, maybe thinking the inhabitant was sound asleep and had somehow remained undisturbed by the presence of Nicolaus and Logan. Upon hearing no response, they ventured further towards the tent and were met with a horrific sight. The lifeless body of an emaciated man was lying in the tent, surrounded by 2 notebooks and over $3,000 in cash. Nicolaus stated that his body was kind of twisted, his eyes were wide open, and he was looking right at me. A sight that must have been truly haunting to look upon. One of the notebooks was filled with handwritten computer codes, which turned out in the end to be linked to a computer game called Screeps, a game where you need a clever mind and extensive knowledge of coding to navigate. The man had no phone, making him virtually untraceable, nor did he possess any cards linking to any bank accounts. In fact, he had no identification on him whatsoever. The two men promptly contacted 911, and a team of police was sent out to find the exact location of this John Doe. When they arrived at the morbid scene, investigators worked swiftly to ensure they could gather all relevant information about the unknown man. They estimated that he was around 35 to 50 years old and had died no more than a few days prior to his discovery, as no major decomposition was detected. His hair and long shaggy beard could best be described as salt and pepper in colouring. He was 5'8" but weighed a measly 83 pounds. There were no distinguishing tattoos or birthmarks, but he had a vertical scar indicating that it was probable he'd had some sort of abdominal surgery in the past. When he was found, he was wearing a beige shirt with bright green shorts, and black Salomon hiking boots were found outside his tent, as well as 2 walking poles. Building a general profile of this John Doe was all well and good, but his identity still remained a mystery. The first step investigators took in identifying him was to take fingerprints. They then began the long process of scouring through military and criminal databases, trying to see if they could find a match. When no matches turned up, they didn't lose hope, as there were still thousands of missing persons records to take a look at. When nobody matching his description turned up in their searches, they were truly stumped. In one last attempt to identify the deceased hiker, investigators issued a bulletin seeking information from the public. Investigators were able to build an accurate composite sketch, along with plenty of information about his estimated age, weight, and height. In spite of this, no family members or friends came forward. It led to the question, who on earth was this man with no name? Well, it turned out he did have a name, but in a frustrating twist, he still remained technically nameless. In the world of hiking, trail names are affectionate names that hikers call themselves, or sometimes they even have them bestowed upon them by the many buddies they meet along the way. The names are usually light-hearted or silly, and it's very common for one's name to have some sort of personal connection to them or their hiking experience. For example, for Scott Lilly, the history-obsessed hiker who was murdered back in 2011, his trail name of Stonewall acted as homage to one of his Civil War heroes, Captain Thomas Stonewall Jackson. After hikers on the trail heard news about the unidentified man, they rallied together in an attempt to work out who he was. Sure enough, our John Doe was instantly recognised, and he went under 2 known trail names, first Denim and then Mostly Harmless. Both names are unusual, but they have their explanations. Denham was bestowed upon him in New York in the April of 2017, when the mystery man is said to have started his hike. It came from the observation that he always wore jeans, which is a big mistake in the world of hiking. Denim jeans are prone to cause chafing, which of course can hinder a hiker's experience greatly. When he first became known on the trail, people made the assumption he was new to hiking, purely based on the fact that he made rookie mistakes, such as the wearing of jeans, and the refusal to carry any sort of mobile phone should he ever find himself in danger. For the many who happened upon Denham, none had a bad word to say about him, and he was well liked and supported throughout his long hike. Many group photos taken with him now serve as fond reminders of the quiet hiker everybody knew and loved. Kelly Fairbanks, a trail angel who helps out on the Florida National Scenic Trail, was one of the many acquaintances of Denham, and her role as a trail angel undoubtedly allowed her to develop a deep level of trust with him. Meeting him on January 24, 2018, she knew him best as his alternative name of Mostly Harmless. Trail angels are people who strive to help hikers, whether that be pointing them in the right direction of the nearest hostel, or supplying them with vital resources. The presence of these wholesome volunteers is widely appreciated. Many are even so kind as to put hikers up for a night or two, and they're utterly passionate about hiking and the great outdoors. Kelly is no exception to this, and although this case is full of holes and uncertainty, it's safe to say her friendship with Denham was key in unlocking some basic facts about him. In fact, she was the first person to call the sheriff about the identity of the mystery John Doe, saying that, "As soon as I saw the composite sketch, I knew who it was. I immediately messaged the Collier County sheriff with a picture." Sure enough, many other shocked hikers agreed and confirmed that it was in fact Denham. Two separate hikers with no connection to one another had stated that Denham told them he was living in Brooklyn, but others disputed this and said that he had told them he was from Louisiana. Many remembered him saying that he used to work in the tech industry. This would make sense, given the discovery of his notebook, filled with computer codes. After he was identified as being this well-known Denham character, investigators were faced with a unique situation, which was they now had dozens of photographs of their John Doe alive, something that rarely happens. Hopeful, the photographs were widely circulated, and the possibility of a positive ID was eagerly discussed. However, nothing turned up, and a heavy sense of frustration was now beginning to linger. The origin of his second name, Mostly Harmless, is somewhat disputed. One Reddit user explained that in the March of 2018, Denham was hanging out with a couple of hikers. One hiker asked the other who he was, and the other hiker joked with, "Oh, he's mostly harmless," so the phrase stuck, becoming Denham's brand new trail name. Others speculate that Mostly Harmless comes from a reference to the 5th book of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series, and this makes sense, given that the man had told people he was an avid fan of the sci-fi genre. Could he have given himself the name because he saw himself as hiking through the vast galaxy that was the Appalachian Trail? Frustratingly, nobody knows for sure. The timeline of Denham's journey through the Appalachian Trail remains pretty clear, despite his confusing anonymity. After he first set out in New York in the April of 2017, he was next documented as being in Dalesville, Virginia, arriving in September. One hiker took to Reddit, stating that he had definitely met him at this time. This man, who met him in Virginia, states that he was nowhere near 83 pounds, and he just looked regular hiker skinny. Come October of the same year, Denham had travelled further south through the state and made it to the small town of Damascus. Here he was forced to take shelter at a hostel called Woodchucks due to a hurricane warning. On the 7th of October, he visited the Damascus Pizza Company Bar and Grill with several other hikers, and the group enjoyed a hearty meal and commemorated the moment with a group photo. In the picture, Denham seems content to be enjoying such a fun moment with his newfound friends. It was now November, and Denham had made it to the Georgia Hostel and Hiking Centre in the town of Hiawassee, Georgia. This particular place is renowned as a typical old-school hostel. Due to their traditional values, the owners of the hostel rarely allow people to check in using their trail names, instead insisting on a formal identification. Learning this, many looking into the case saw the hostel in Georgia as somewhere they could uncover concrete evidence as to the true identity of Denham, so they checked the hostel's records as soon as they could. On November 22nd, 2017, a man named Ben Billamy had checked in at this popular hostel, along with a small group of other hikers. After checking with these hikers, they confirmed that the man who had signed his name as Ben Billamy was Denham. Likely feeling excited to finally receive a lead, people searched every public record for a Ben Billamy, but were extremely disappointed when they found zero evidence of this person even existing. They checked different variations of the spelling, but that led them nowhere. For reasons unknown, it was obvious that Denham had used Ben Billamy as an alias, seemingly desperate to conceal his identity from those around him. Those working so desperately to get his name back felt they were now back to square one. The discovery of Denham's body caught the attention of another Reddit user, Darkbird is Home. In 2018, he commented that I camped with him in December last year at Springer Mountain Shelter. We got along really well. We stayed up late talking about everything from Doctor Who to growing up with abusive fathers, which we both happened to share. He told me his dad took him out in the yard and tried to fight him when he was a teenager. He was a really neat guy with a great story. I'm glad I got to meet him. I just wished he had told me his name. When he was quizzed further by other curious users, he elaborated that Denham said he'd cut ties with his family and that he'd had an ex-girlfriend and maybe a sister. However, he couldn't remember details about the sister for sure. Two more people who were lucky enough to meet Denham were hikers Snapper and Sugar Rush. On February 22nd, the two ladies were hiking along the Florida Trail when they encountered him travelling south. At this time of the year, the trail was flooded and quite difficult to walk through, but the experienced hikers had no trouble. When they introduced themselves to Denham, they were surprised to find he had no GPS, nor any maps. In a blog post, Snapper wrote about her encounter. She said, I don't know how he has gotten as far as he has. Both Sugar Rush and I have had issues with the area. Even with our GPS position in hand, we exchanged trail information for various sections, going into greater detail than usual to help Mostly Harmless out as best we could. 2 days after meeting Sugar Rush and Snapper, Denham had made it further south to the Pine Log State Forest. Here, he met a fellow hiker who was staying at the Sand Pond campground. Nothing distinctive about his appearance stood out to the fellow camper, as they make no mention of Denham looking thin or sick. Interestingly, Denham explained that he'd just got back on the trail after living at his sister's for a while. The hiker remembered that he said she lived somewhere around the Fort Myers area, but couldn't remember the exact location. Denham told her that he used to work in the technology industry, a detail that keeps cropping up, and mentioned that he was in poor health. In fact, the hiker distinctly remembers him saying that he needed to do the trail while he still could. Was it possible that Denham wanted to cross the trail off his bucket list, like so many other outdoor enthusiasts? Maybe he'd recently discovered that he had a life-threatening illness. Or maybe he just said it because he was no spring chicken anymore. In many photographs, Denham can be seen leaning into his walking poles as if they're needed to support him. There's also pictures of him where he's wearing knee braces, and if you look closely at his knees, you can see they seem to be quite misshapen or swollen. It's true that carrying a 50-pound rucksack is bound to put weight on your joints, but I can't help but wonder if Denham was beginning to feel especially weak in his final few months. An inconsistency that keeps cropping up in the frustrating case of Mostly Harmless is that he had no trouble with his picture being taken. If he had wanted true anonymity and to not be recognised by his loved ones, you'd think he would be quite camera shy. However, he was quite the opposite, and there are several photos of him posing with a wide smile upon his face. There is even a video of him taken in Georgia in late 2017. In the video, he's speaking with other hikers about directions and where he can find the best stores to buy supplies. Unfortunately, the audio is pretty bad and is obscured by white noise. Mostly Harmless speaks very briefly, and you can just about make it out. He asks the question, "Go straight up that way, yeah?" I will now play the enhanced audio courtesy of YouTube user Gareth H. Gareth reckons that his accent sounds distinctively foreign, but a few other people have said that they hear a mild Canadian accent come through. The majority of people who met Denham have disagreed with this, and it's widely agreed that he had no distinctive twang or lilt to his voice, and he just spoke with a standard American accent. What do you think? One of the last people to meet Denham was a hiker up near Paisley in Florida. It was March 17th, 2018, a mere 4 months before his body was discovered. Despite looking a little skinny, he seemed to be in a good mood, and the hiker had no cause for concern. They chatted for a while, and the hiker even took a picture of him that proved to be one of the last photos ever taken of Denham. In the picture, he's wearing the same outfit he was found in, and he looks a little thinner than in other photos, but nowhere near 83 pounds. He's leaning on his walking poles and has visible dark circles under his eyes. It goes without saying that by this point he was starting to look unwell. But what would cause his dramatic 4-month weight loss? When Deputy Chief Medical Examiner Manfred D. Borges performed a thorough autopsy on the body, he stated on the final report that Denham's cause of death was undetermined, a status that seems fitting for this baffling case. The medical examiner further elaborated, though, that it was likely he died from starvation due to extreme cachexia noted on the body. Cachexia can best be described as a medical condition that causes extreme fat and muscle loss and is a debilitating symptom of many chronic illnesses such as late-stage cancers and HIV. Characteristics of this condition include visible ribs, pelvic bones, and minimal muscular and skeletal tissues. Its sufferers are also blighted with something called bitemporal wasting, giving their face a distinctive appearance. It comes as no surprise that the condition is also known as wasting syndrome, due to the sheer speed the body effectively wastes away. In spite of this, the body of Mostly Harmless revealed no illnesses of any sort. In fact, he had no major injuries whatsoever, meaning foul play or accidental death was highly unlikely. There was no hint of a terminal cancer eating away at him or diseases present in his blood. When his stomach contents were examined, it's likely that medical officers were expecting to find no contents. After all, Denham's physique resembled that of a starved prisoner of war opposed to that of a physically fit through hiker. However, they were surprised to find fecal matter present in his bowel, and his kidneys were in a good condition, meaning he'd been eating and drinking fine in the days prior to his death. Furthermore, he had food in his possession. Given all these factors, the hows and whys of Denham's starvation remain an extremely mystifying query. In the toxicology report, the only unnatural substances in his system were hints of Benadryl and ibuprofen, two drugs commonly ingested by hikers to ease allergies and relieve muscle aches. One thing noted was a visible discoloration and abrasion to the shaft of his genital area, and the cause of this could not be determined. Some people suggested chafing, some reckoned bug bites, but the true culprit of this intimate injury remains one of the many strange mysteries in this case. Denham's case has been compared to the case of Christopher McCandless, an American hiker in search of a simpler life. His body was found in 1992 by a group of moose hunters, weighing a measly 68 pounds. It's widely believed that, like Mostly Harmless, he died from starvation. In 1992, Christopher hitchhiked his way to Fairbanks, Alaska from South Dakota. He was last seen alive by an Alaskan native who gave him a ride. He noted that his light clothing and lack of supplies were a recipe for disaster in the Alaskan bush. When warned about the dangerous elements, Christopher assured the man he'd be okay, and he was, for some time at least. After he was dropped off, he spent some time hiking through the snow until he came across an abandoned bus where he lived for at least 100 days. He's believed to have survived on mushrooms, Canada geese, and even porcupines. It's also speculated that he ransacked local cabins for provisions. Regularly documenting his experience in a journal, Christopher's entries became more sporadic and strange over time. His final entry simply reads, "Beautiful blue berries." At roughly the same time, Christopher took what is believed to be his final picture. A sign he is holding in the picture reads, "I have had a happy life and thank the Lord. Goodbye, and may God bless all." A haunting note was also found on the bus that he called home. It read, "Attention possible visitors. SOS, I need your help. I am injured near death and too weak to hike out. I am all alone. This is no joke. In the name of God, please remain to save me. I am out collecting berries close by and shall return this evening. Thank you. Chris McCandless, August." Could Denham have found himself in a similar situation? Tragically, the two men took the details of their final moments to the grave. After realising they were running out of missing persons records to scour through, investigators were beginning to lose hope. Hope came, though, in July of 2020, when detectives teamed up with company DNA Solves in an attempt to identify Denham's ancestral lineage. DNA Solves uses GED match technology at their lab, Othram Inc., to match DNA to unsolved criminal cases. It gained significant attention when it was used to put the infamously unknown Golden State Killer behind bars. In 2018, a new member's DNA was uploaded to the website, and sure enough, they turned out to be the distant relative of the vicious killer, matching DNA recovered from many crime scenes. This saw that Joseph D'Angelo was swiftly arrested, and the prospect that you could solve many unsolved murders and John Doe cases simply through submitting your DNA became exciting news. On November 2nd of this year, an article by Nicholas Thompson was published on the popular Wired magazine's website, and this brought with it a brand new wave of amateur sleuths, all getting lost down this fascinating rabbit hole that is the case of Mostly Harmless. Over the 2 years since Denham's body was found, a huge community of people have come together, all determined to find out who he was. From sharing his pictures hundreds of times to scouring through missing persons records, those committed to finding this John Doe's real name are truly inspirational. Although he died nameless, alone, and with seemingly nobody looking for him, the resilience of the community has proved that he will never be forgotten. For months, I've been one of the many people completely fascinated by this case, and along with others, I now feel very hopeful we can get this man's name back. With the help of technology such as DNA solves, and this case getting very popular in recent months, I feel as though we'll have answers very soon. Thank you for listening to this episode of Dead Strange. I hope you can join me again next week. I have been your host, Sophie Ray. Bye for now.